Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Big 12 Media Days. I have a feeling we're going to continue talking about that just a little bit tomorrow because there was so much that came out that I didn't have a chance to get to in that segment. But let's jump into Ohio State and let's ask the question that everyone is asking. Is it really national title or bust for the Buckeyes this upcoming season? Because when we talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes into the season, everything is on the table. There's not a thing that they can't do, including going 17-0 and rolling over literally everyone in their schedule and being one of the most dominant teams in college football history. That is truly on the table for this team. This roster is out of this world. The coaching staff is incredible, and it's going to be really, really fun to watch. But the question still stands: is it really national title or bust? I tend to believe no, but it is a huge season for Ohio State nonetheless, and there's going to be a ton riding on it. Obviously, Ryan Day did the thing that a lot of coaches do when they're under a little bit of scrutiny, when some people are getting a little bit worried about their future. They give up play calling duties. It's something that's happened a couple of different times throughout the last, 10 or so years in college football. Some head coaches who are play callers will give up those duties, go on to win a national title. It's something that people worry about with Lincoln Riley, something people worry about with Kalen DeBoer and Steve Sarkisian, and we'll see if that continues to hold up. But it was a move that was made up in Ohio State this past offseason, and he hired one of the best guys in the business. Chip Kelly is going to do an incredible job with this offense. It's not an easy offense to, get a hold on if you're a quarterback, but once you do, it's going to be pretty incredible what you're capable of. Losing 3 years in a row to Michigan can't happen. That's just the reality. But it did. And now losing 4 years in a row just cannot happen. So the reality is if they lose to Michigan, regardless of what happens the rest of the season, there will be some Ohio State fans after that game that are calling for his job. I can almost promise you that. They could walk in 11-0, be one of the most dominant teams in the country. If they drop that game, there will be people that do not want Ryan Day as the head coach going forward. But on top of that, Ohio State is one of the most talented teams in the country, in the most talented team I've ever seen. I feel pretty confident saying that. Now, I'm a younger guy, so didn't necessarily get to see the 2001 Miami teams and some of the remarkable teams of the past, but this is one of the most remarkable rosters that I've ever seen. There's not a hole in the 2 deep. There's not a hole in the 3 deep. It's insane what they have up at Ohio State, and the amount of energy that has been put into this particular year and this particular staff and this particular roster is out of this world. It is no secret that Ohio State upped their NIL game a ton in the portal this last season. It's no secret getting Caleb Downs and getting Quinshon Judkins, it took a little bit of NIL money. Not saying that that was the driving force, but they stepped up their game quite a bit. If you ask anyone that knows anything about those negotiations, Ohio State was willing to do what needed to happen to make this team as good as possible. And then you had guys that came back from the draft that you could argue shouldn't have from where they would have fallen in the draft, but they absolutely could have and would have been drafted. Denzel Burke, JTT, Jack Sawyer, and many others, especially on that defensive side of the ball, could have found their way into the NFL and had very little problem finding a place to play. But the cherry on top is this is what their starting quarterback said. Will Howard has said that outright, that this is a national championship or bust year, and while I disagree with that sentiment, I do agree that every single person in that building has to think that. Every single person in the Ohio State building has to think we have to win a national title, because you have to show up with that just extra little edge every single day. So that's why Ohio State is the team this year. That's why everyone is pointing in the direction of Columbus, Ohio, and saying Ryan Day's got to deliver. This team's got to deliver. So many things have to happen for this team because all the chips are at the center of the table. Now, all the chips are always at the center of the table at Ohio State. They are always after that national title every single year, bar none. This year, they basically just added a couple of gold bars to the middle of the pot. Like, it's insane what they've done to build up this team for this year. So, obviously, it's a huge year. There's no two ways about that. This is the time to strike. This is the time to win a national title and get back on top of the sport. But is it title or bust? Is it, do they win a title, or this thing is an entire failure? I say no, and I say that for every single team that has ever existed, and will say it for every single team that will exist going forward. no team should ever be title or bust. I understand the sentiment that is going into this, don't get me wrong, but I do think there is a reality where they go 16-0 and they're rolling into the national title and they're a fantastic team, one of the best teams in the country, and then they fall to Georgia or they fall to Texas and by last second field goal or by, a freak play in the fourth quarter. And I'm not going to sit here at the end of the day and say that was a total failure. I understand that it's a disappointing finish. I understand it's not the way you wanted to finish the season, but you still went 16-1. You still did a ton of incredible things, including beating Oregon, beating Michigan, winning a Big Ten title, getting to a national title in the first year of the 12-team playoff. And the fun little tidbit here is if they win that 12-team playoff, they'll be the first team to win the 4-team and the 12-team. So that's kind of just a weird little wrinkle into this season. If they meet Oregon in the championship, same matchup in both of those. So just a little thing to watch throughout the season. But college football is any given Saturday. Everyone understands that there are some games that just don't make sense. The UCF beating Oklahoma State a year ago, 45-3, that made no sense. App State going into Kyle Field and getting that win last year made no sense. College football doesn't make sense, and especially in those late season games, those semifinals, those finals, the variability is just insane, and the amount of margin between winning and losing is razor thin. So I'm not going to sit here and say that they have to win a title because that's just putting too much on one specific game where maybe you just don't play your best football. And I understand that there are some scenarios where if they get blown out in that championship game or get blown out in that semifinal, then I do have a problem. I won't argue that. But I do want to get into what I think would be a true bust for this season and a true disappointment for the Buckeyes because the expectations are through the roof, and they should be, because there's a number of things that they just plain and simple have to do. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. You got to beat Michigan. You got to knock off the team up north because losing to that team 4 years in a row is a nightmare scenario for Ohio State. It's an entire group of recruits coming in and going through their time at Ohio State without beating that team once. That's insane, especially when you think back to before those 3 years when Ohio State pretty much dominated this thing from start to finish. It was insane, the control they had over, and then it flipped on a dime, and they got to fix that this year. The next thing that they have to do is find a way to get to Indianapolis. Now, I don't necessarily think they have to win it. I think they do have to get into that game, but same principle I used for the national title, I'm going to use for this game. They could just not play their best football that day, and they'd still be in the playoff, and that would be more than fine. That's the other thing. They got to make the playoff. There's no two ways about that. They should be one of the top 12 teams in the country, even if a number of things go wrong. As they did last year, they were still a top 12 team in the country. So I think they definitely do have to make the playoff. They don't necessarily have to be a top 4 seed, but on top of that, they got to get to the semis. I do think that is a reality that just has to happen for this team. And I understand that is incredibly lofty because if you don't get that bye, you got to win a game possibly on your home turf, possibly not, but then you got to win another huge game against a team that maybe beat you or another team that won their conference. It'll be definitely a huge fight for them. Or if you do get that bye, you still got to play that big time game against maybe a team that just got hot with a big time win in the first round. So there's a lot of variables there, but this team is head and shoulders above the majority of college football when it comes to talent level, when it comes to coaching, when it comes to NIL resources into this year. Everything is put into 2024 for Ohio State. So it's that simple for me. Win the game. Win that Michigan game. Beat Michigan, and bar none, that is number one goal. Get to the Big Ten title. Absolutely do that. That's no question. They need to do that this upcoming year, and then make the college football playoff semis. I think if they do all those things, everywhere else I'm good. I think they could go, 14-2 or 13-2, and this season would be successful. I think they have the ability to do that. Now, if you're an Ohio State fan, you want a title. You want a Big Ten title. You want a national title, and I fully understand that because this team is darn good. But I'm never going to be someone that says this is national title or bust because I don't think that exists in pretty much any sport. I do think they're a crazy high bar for this team. I do think it's one of those teams that if you were going to say national title or bust about pretty much any team over the last 2 decades. I think this might be the team that you would say it about, but I still wouldn't agree. I do think this is going to be a huge season for them, and there are a lot of lofty, need to happen type things. But at the end of the day, I think they're still a team that if you get to the Big Ten title and beat Michigan on the way and get to the semis and lose on a last-second field goal like you did in the playoff a couple of years ago, it's hard for me to sit there and say that's a failure. Now, all that to say, every single person in that building up at Ohio State, up in Columbus, should think that. There's no two ways about that. Every single player, every single coach, every single nutrition person, strength and conditioning, whoever it is, they should think that way, because you have to approach this year as the biggest year of your life, as the biggest year. It's definitely the biggest year of Ryan Day's coaching life. It's definitely the biggest year of a lot of these guys' playing careers. There's so much going into this year, and if you're not walking into that building saying every single day we have to win a national title, you're probably going about your business the wrong way. Now, I won't say that, but I fully think and fully agree with Ohio State players, Ohio State fans, Ohio State personnel saying that to the nth degree. So this is a huge year. There's no two ways about that. It is as much pressure I've seen on a team really ever going into one particular season. I don't think I've ever seen a team that has this much riding on them, but it comes with the territory. You are Ohio State. You do have the most talented team in the country by, I don't want to say a comfortable margin. Georgia's nipping on their heels a little bit there, but at the end of the day, you do have the most talented team in the country. You did put just insane amounts of money and resources into this year. If you don't deliver, then let's just say Ryan Day is going to have a very interesting offseason if he doesn't deliver. I'll leave it at that for the time being. But let's take our second break here. And when we come back, I'm going to get back into my guys for the 2024 season. I have a couple of guys here that I just think are going to have really, really good seasons. Some of them are a little bit more experienced guys. Some are new guys that you might not know about. I did dip down into the group of 5 level to give you some guys to be fun to watch at that level. So I think this is a really, really fun group, and maybe you'll learn a name or two that you didn't know about that are really, really fun players. So stick around, and we'll be right back with that.